Chess YouTube, it is only move 7, and what does Fabiano Caruana have in mind versus the GOAT Magnus Carlsen right here in this position? I'll tell you what he has in mind. He has in mind the rook sacrifice, b5. Magnus here, he takes the pawn, Fabiano takes back, and Magnus takes the rook on the a8 square. Why on earth did Fabiano Caruana go full Gotham Chess in this game in the Champions Chess Showdown tournament, which just happened in late October? Well, let's find out. Going back to the very beginning here in the game, Magnus playing as white opens 1d4 and Fabiano 1d5. Then we have knight to f3, knight f6, and then c4, the Queen's Gambit opening, one of the oldest, strongest, and most important openings in the history of the game of chess, even to this very day. From here, Fabiano plays the very interesting move d takes c4, opting not to go for the Queen's Gambit decline, which really is all the rage these days at the highest level. So, d takes c4, and Magnus here, the main move by far, the only real move played at the highest level, is going to be e3, trying to win back this pawn on c4 with the bishop like this. But instead, Magnus here on move 4, queen to a4 check. Not a bad move per se, but very, very rare. All right, Fabiano, knight bd7. He blocks the check of the queen. And now Magnus here, instead of capturing on c4 with the queen, that to me is the most obvious idea. Instead, knight to c3 is the move, potentially setting up a fast e4, then e5 break in the center. All right, Fabiano, a6, intending potentially a fast b5 idea. And Magnus here, he does not go e4. Oh no, instead, bishop to f4 is the move, pressuring c7. Maybe intending perhaps knight d5 or b5 ideas, pressuring c7. I'm not so sure. Let's see what happens. All right, Fabiano, e6, a very standard idea here, intending potentially a fast c5 break, which is very, very typical for black in the Queen's Gambit accepted. Now Magnus, e4, intending potentially e5 ideas, and finally we get the key moment in the opening. Fabiano here has a lot of ideas. He can just go, for example, c5, or bishop e7 and castles. Those would be perfectly fine. That is the standard idea here for black. But instead, Fabiano goes full Gotham Chess, and I do mean full Gotham Chess, and he plays the move b5. Now, this is simply insane. Fabiano giving up the pawn on b5 as the pawn would be pinned to the rook on the a8 square. Magnus here, he sees the idea. This guy being the GOAT, of course, he's going to see this, and he takes on b5. Knight takes b5, a brilliant move. The point being, again, the pawn is pinned to the rook on the a8 square. So what does Fabiano Caruana do right here? Well, he does the only thing he can do. If he does not take the knight, he's simply down a pawn. The c4 pawn falls. He's going to lose the game versus Magnus. There's no other way about it. So here, he takes the knight, and Magnus takes the rook. Queen takes a8. Fabiano Caruana going full Gotham Chess before move 10 in this game versus the GOAT. What does he know that we don't know about this game? Well, he knows, despite being down the pawn and down the exchange, down the rook for the knight, he has a vicious, and I mean vicious, attack against the white king. He begins bishop b4, the strong move, hitting the king on the e1 square. And now what is the king going to do? It turns out there is not an easy response. For example, if you block the attack with, say, bishop d2 or knight d2, Fabi here simply castles and gets a massive, and I mean massive, attack against the white king. He's just so far ahead in development. Now, instead, in the game, Magnus here, he plays the Bong Cloud style move. I mean, what else would you expect from this guy, the king of the Bong Cloud opening? He plays the move king to e2. Now, this right here, if you don't know, is literally the Bong Cloud move, named after the Bong Cloud opening, e4, e5, and then the move king to e2, which he famously played versus Hikaru in the Speed Chess Championships. Now, back to move 10, king to e2 right here. Fabi, he finds the extremely strong idea of e5, expanding in the center right away, trying to open up the game to attack the white king on the e2 square. And this king obviously is just completely misplaced. It blocks in the bishop, it's stuck in the center of the board. This is no good here. Magnus here, he trades on e5, d takes, and Fabi takes back with the knight. Knight takes e5. What is the idea? Why would he give up the knight on the e5 square. It's very, very simple. That knight is poisoned. You cannot take it. And if you like puzzles, try to figure out why white cannot take this knight with the bishop or the knight right here. It's very, very cool. Here's the problem. If you take with the knight, knight takes e5. Black has the move, bishop g4 check, hitting the king, but also hitting the queen, and you win the queen on a8 like this. Now, instead, if you take with the bishop here, bishop takes, that loses on the spot to queen d3 checkmates. And white loses the game. Therefore, Magnus here, he cannot do either of those moves. The knight on e5 is simply poisoned. Instead, rook d1 is the move in this game. And now, Fabi, here is the big idea. Knight d3, the knight jumps in, achieves immortality as an octopus on the d3 square, hitting literally everything in the white camp. F2, F4, B2, and so on. Nothing is safe. The octopus lives on D3. All right, Fabi, queen C6 hits the king, but then bishop D7 blocks the attack. Queen takes C7, wins a pawn, offers the queen trade, and obviously Fabi here, he knows you cannot trade queens when you go full Gotham chess like that. Instead, queen to A8 is the move, pressuring E4. I mean, just look at the black pieces right here. The queen eyeing e4, as does the knight. The knight on d3 being a literal octopus. The bishop on b4 slicing down this diagonal, and the black king about to castle. And compare that to the white position. Nothing in the white camp besides maybe the rook makes any sense right here. Everything is just a complete disaster for white so far in this game. And Fabi is just in complete control here. Now, Magnus being the GOAT of endgames, he does find a way to transpose into a decent endgame at first glance. Queen to b8 is the move, forcing the trade of queens. We have king to e7, then queen takes, and now here, Fabi, he simply wins the bishop on the f4 square. Knight takes f4, hits the king with check, king to e3, rook takes, and then king takes. All right, let's slow down here and take inventory, and don't worry. This endgame is not your typical endgame. This was simply unbelievable. The play, I mean, I don't want to give it away, but keep watching. Trust me. All right, let's take inventory here. What is happening? Magnus here is literally up the equivalent of 3 pawns in the endgame. He has the extra exchange. That being, of course, the rook for the bishop, plus the extra pawn. So why on earth did Fabi head for this position right here? What is the idea? Well, it turns out the attack against the white king is just beginning. White's troubles in this game have only just begun, and we are about to witness peak Fabiano Caruana chess right here, right now. Fabi, he begins. Rook takes a2, winning the free pawn on the a2 square. Magnus, what will he do about the defense of the b2 pawn? Well, he defends with rook b1, but this is not the right idea. It is simply too passive, and now the king on f4 has become the hunted. Instead here, moves like e5, pressuring this knight, or h4, guarding g5, were the right way forward. Instead, rook b1 played in the game, and Fabi here, he begins the onslaught, the never-ending attack against the white king with the brilliant move, g5, the pawn sack. White here can take with the king or the knight, but either way is simply no good. In the game, we have king takes g5, but then knight takes e4, hits the king, hits f2, and will hit h1 in the very near future. The king moves, king to f4, attacking the knight. Knight takes f2, wins the free pawn on the f2 square. The rook slides to g1, rook g1, but now bishop to d6. And just look at the black pieces here, all swarming in on the white king. Where is it gonna go? The king goes to g5, king g5 played in the game. If you go back to, say, e3, then bishop c5 is a deadly, deadly move, hitting the king plus the rook via the x-ray attack, and white is simply not long for this world. Instead, king g5 played in the game, and the attack continues. Knight to e4, hits the king on the g5 square. The king moves to h4, king to h4, and then bishop to c5, hits the rook on g1, and forces the only move here from white, simply rook to h1. Now, bishop f5, black closing in on the white king. g4 hits the bishop. Now bishop e6 slides back, and again the king is still being completely cut off here. I mean, that knight on e4, cutting off the king on the g file, the pawn on g4 also cutting it off, and the king is isolated on the h file here. All right, from here, bishop h3 is the move, defending g4 somehow, some way, but now black finds the principle of two weaknesses. It begins the attack on the queen side as well with the move b4. Fabi, he knows past pawns must be pushed. The idea now is distract the white pieces on the king side. Meanwhile, you also attack on the queen side, creating a second front to attack on, and it's going to be simply too much in this game. White plays the move rook h to f1, trying to activate his rook on the h file, but now b3 locks down the b pawn, and the idea is simple. At some point in the future, if the b2 pawn falls, the b pawn on b3 will be so close to promoting, and beyond that, black can also go c3 at some point, forcing the trade of b pawns, and then go b2, trying to promote. All right, white here, g5 is the move. Then bishop to f2 hits the king on h4. Now here, what can white do? Well, the only two moves here are to give up the rook, give up the exchange, or to play the move king to h5. Now, king to h5 loses on the spot to simply bishop takes h3. You lose a piece on the spot, and that is simply game over. There is no way to come back from that. That is just simply too much against Fabi. Therefore, instead, Magnus here, he is forced to go full Gotham Chess in response, and he gives up the rook. Gives up the rook. Rook takes f2, the best move, the only good practical chance in this game, and Fabi takes back. Knight takes f2. Then we have bishop f1, sliding back with the bishop, trying to keep it alive, and then king to d6. Now here, without that dark square bishop, there is no real way to attack the white king. Therefore, now, the entire game for Fabi revolves around trying to find some way to win the pawn on b2, and then push these pawns down the board. That is the new main front of attack. All right, white, king g3, black, knight e4 hits the king. Black trying to find some way to reroute this knight to a better square, perhaps, for example, c5, and then a4 pressuring b2. That could be one idea so far in this game. All right, Fabi, king to f4 is the move. Then knight c5, king e3, and then knight to a4. And from here, there is simply no defense of that pawn on a2. But Magnus, being the GOAT of endgames, the GOAT in general, he continues the fight. Knight d2 is the move. Knight takes b2. Now, king d4, king to e7, h4, expanding on the king side, and f6, trying to break up those king side pawns. We have knight e4, f takes, h takes, bishop f5, with the pin on the rook on the b1 square with the knights. Now here, rook e1 gets out of the pin, and here Fabi plays a little bit of a dubious idea. All he has to do here is simply slide his king out of the way of the x-ray attack with, for example, king 2, f8, king 2, d8. Either of these moves would be perfectly fine. But Fabi here, in time pressure, in this rapid game. Sorry, I could not get the timers to work in this game for some reason. Blame chess.com, not me. For some reason here, Fabi, he plays the move bishop takes e4, and this is just what Magnus needs to fight back in this game. Magnus, he trades on e4 with the rook. Rook takes, the king moves, king to f7. And here, if Magnus finds one simple move, he will be fighting back in this game and have drawing chances. All he has to find here is simply the move rook to e1. That is it. And Magnus here, he finds the key idea, rook to e1. Rook to e1. Magnus, you missed the idea. King to c3 is not the move. Rook to e1 is the move, defending on the back rank. Instead, king to c3. And Magnus here is in so much trouble. Fabi, knight d1 hits the king moves, king b4, rook c2. What can white do now to stop b2 and then b1 promoting to a queen? I don't know. Here, Magnus, rook e1 is the move, but then knight b2 threatening the fork on d3. And Magnus, he plays the move bishop to h3, relinquishing control of d3. Magnus missing the fork, and Fabi plays the move knight d3, hitting the king and the rook. And from here, Magnus Carlsen losing the rook. He has to resign on the spot to Fabiano Caruana. He misses the simple elementary tactic knight d3 and loses the game to Fabi. Woo! What a game. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and let this be a prelude to the quarterfinals match coming up in the Speed Chess Champions between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. That is going to be a game, or a match, sorry, for the ages. I cannot wait for that match. Anyways, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, smash the like button, comment down below. What do you think of this game where Fabi goes literally full Gotham Chess on move 7 with the move b5, giving up the rook on a8 for the attack? What a wild game. All right, guys, if you can, smash that like button, comment down below. And by the way, if you want to learn how to get better at online chess from me, I do have a free online chess community where I have free courses for you, free group coaching calls on the weekends, a free community where we have over 1,000 people right now, all sharing their wins, sharing their latest games, getting feedback on how to improve by me and everyone else in the community. We also have epic, and I mean epic prize. I'm literally giving away a free diamond membership to chess.com for an entire year to 3 winners in the month of November. If you want to get in on that, it's our November Chess Challenge. Just join my free community, drmikechess.com. Links also down below in the pinned comment and the description for this video. It's free to join, free to compete. I'm giving away free prizes plus everything else included. I mean, what more could you ask for from me? I don't know. This is all I got. So if you want to join, and I'll see you there. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.